Namaskar Longpo. The question is, can Sikh Longpo advise on how to overcome jealousy? Like someone is better than us, how should we deal with our feelings?
You have to think like a bodhisattva. Like people in Singapore, Malaysia, they love to go and see Chinese temples with statues of Kuan Yin and other bodhisattvas. And what do? They're paying respects or recollecting or praying to a bodhisattva. And what does the bodhisattva aspire to? They aspire to freeing all beings from suffering. They say, may I be the last one to be enlightened, may everyone else be enlightened before me. So the bodhisattva, they're complete with the 4 Brahmaviharas. That's goodwill, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And their job is to help all beings across samsara and reach enlightenment. So if somebody else is getting ahead of us, better than us, we have to think like a bodhisattva. Oh, that's really good. They're getting closer to the end of suffering. They're doing well. They're getting ahead. One less job for the bodhisattva to do. And if we're thinking like a bodhisattva, that's one less job for us to do. Because the quality of mudita, or sympathetic joy, is directly opposed to jealousy. So rather than looking back at oneself and thinking, oh, they've got ahead, why are they always getting ahead and not me? Why does the good things happen to them and not me? You think, that person's getting ahead, that's good. May they be happy, may they continue to be successful. Then the bodhisattva has one less job to do. That's good for the bodhisattva, it's good for everybody in the world. One person getting closer to enlightenment.
Thank you, Longpo. Longpo, there's another second question. How can we practice asubha? How can we see that the filthiness of the body? Should we look at those gruesome images to practice? Thank you, Longpo.
If it helps, yes. Many monks will use images and which are available now online, and because you need some information to start with. But it's not the only source of information to begin developing the perception of the unattractiveness of the body. You can use your own body. So, every day we have to bathe because we smell, we have sweat, our hair gets greasy, we go to the toilet, we urinate, we defecate. If we're mindful and we direct mindfulness to our own body, we'll start to notice the flaws, the unattractive parts, the saliva, the snot, the earwax, all the different parts which are not very attractive. You can make them the focus of your mindfulness, and that starts to make it very apparent, and that might be enough. Another practice that monks and sometimes lay people do is contemplation of the loathsomeness of food. So like Ajahn Kalyano used to encourage the monks, when you chew your first mouthful of food of your meal, before you swallow, actually spit it out and put it in your hand. And look at the qualities of that piece of food, which just a moment ago was very tasty, delicious looking, beautiful to look at, nice smelling. Now it's mixed with saliva. And you probably don't even want to re-swallow it, you'd rather throw it away. That's what's happening every time we eat. It's just we don't think of that. We don't focus our mind on the unattractive side of food, the digestion and all of that. We only are focusing on what we like about food, the smell, the color, the visual image and so on. So a super is like this. You're directing your mind to look at the whole picture. You're not denying that there is attractiveness in the physical form or in food, but you're also noticing there's the unattractive side. So you're balancing up your perceptions to help reduce the strength of craving, desire. When you get more into it, maybe then you're ready to look at the more difficult pictures of a corpse or a skeleton. And that's why, say, at NDR, I noticed they have the skeleton up in the corner. In our monastery, we have a skeleton hanging up. We use whatever's available. So people, they go to hospitals to see autopsies. They maybe with a group of medical students and so on, they go to see an autopsy and you get visual images, and it's quite confronting. But it's done in a way that is presenting it as knowledge for you. You're seeing a corpse on a table, and you're able to look at that corpse. Unfortunately, there'll be a smell. There may be some description if you're lucky. Maybe there's someone, a pathologist or someone who's there giving you some description. That's another way you get the information online as well. So you get whatever information you can from books, from online. If you can go to an autopsy, from your own body, even other people's bodies. You can notice somebody else's body. Sometimes they have different, they display different sides of the body. You're maybe with someone and you notice their hair is greasy, or they have some blemishes on their body. You can do this. You can open your mind up to observe the simple fact of nature, that there is the unattractive side of the physical form. So you don't have to necessarily do anything special, but just start noticing what's there already. And this is bringing up a sense of dispassion, we call it dispassion, as opposed to last passion, dispassion towards the body. And then, of course, the idea is to bring it inwards, to visually bring up those images in your mind. And as your mindfulness improves, the state of calm improves, then you may be able to hold those images. Sometimes those images arise all by themselves. Sometimes you create them and then you focus your mind on them. And this is quite confronting for many people. It's quite confronting in the beginning. So it's something you approach gently, go towards it gently. When you're feeling calm, then you turn to contemplate the unattractiveness of the body. If you're finding it too difficult, or it's making you feel angry or afraid or not peaceful, then stop, that's fine. It's something you do when the situation is right and your mind feels right. But some people find when they're doing this meditation, they become very calm, very peaceful. And even sense of piti and sukha, rapture and joy arises because of this. And one can attain samadhi, one can even enter a state of jhana based on the asubha kammatthana. So, take it slowly, use whatever information is available, and little by little work towards it.
Thank you, Long Po. Long Po, there's another question from NDR.
Long Po, good morning. I have a question. Yesterday you mentioned about there are some teachers who are like shooting stars, very popular. They don't emphasize on sila, they don't emphasize on meditation, but rather only mindfulness. So I have a friend who also met with such a popular teacher. So her reason is that those teachers who are married with children, they have realized emptiness. So for someone who have realized emptiness, they are not bounded by conventional, our understanding why they are doing such thing. And usually they have very great psychic power. They display psychic, magic, and that's why the students are convinced. So what is Ajahn comments on this? Thank you.
Well, it's hard to generalize, isn't it? Because I don't know these teachers, I don't know who you're referring to and how they live, so I can't really comment. There's more the idea there are some teachers who become famous very quickly, but it turns out later that maybe they weren't as wise as they thought, or their morality, their conduct wasn't as good as people thought. Obviously, there are many good teachers around as well, but one has to be open to the possibility. So the Buddha said to get to know a teacher over time, see what their level of morality is, see whether what they teach matches what the Buddha teaches and their conduct matches. So like, say for a monk, once you become a Buddhist monk, even if you become enlightened and you have insight into emptiness or you have psychic powers, you don't change your rules because of that. You don't change your practices because of that. So once you're a monk, you always keep the Vinaya or the monastic discipline until you die. That's just standard. There's no kind of exemption. For a monk who's seen emptiness, he doesn't have to follow the rules. He can let go of them and do all kinds of funny things. There's no allowance for that in the Vinaya. The Vinaya is something that is, once you're a monk, you keep the rules, you follow the rules till you die. So if anyone, monk or layperson, for some reason is not following the basic guidelines of the Buddhist teachings, they don't keep the precepts, or they say something that doesn't seem to match what the Buddha said or taught, then you're quite welcome to be suspicious or skeptical, or take your time to consider, where's this person coming from? What are they saying? What are they doing? You shouldn't rush to believe or just accept something, and especially things you can't prove. So when someone says, I can perform psychic powers, or I have experienced emptiness, maybe they have, but maybe they haven't, and you can't prove it, can you? So as one of the reasons people had a lot of faith in Ajahn Chah is because he wouldn't really talk about that side of things. I mean, maybe in private with monks who he really trusted and who trusted him, but generally when he taught, he didn't teach about things that you can't prove, things you can't see. So, to talk about beings in other realms or see somebody and say, well, your karma from last life, this happened, that happened. He didn't do that because it's so open to interpretation, and some people believe you, some people don't. Some people will imitate, and he had a lot of students. And then if all the students are doing that, then the world can become a very confusing place, because things you can't see or know yourself, well, if you believe them, you're open to manipulation. They may be true, but you're open to manipulation, aren't you? Because somebody may, for more unwholesome, unsavory reasons, want to fool you, deceive you, maybe because they want to get famous or make money or get more students. So it's not generally the flavor of the Dhamma Vinaya that the Buddha taught. It doesn't go that way. It's not to say there aren't such things as psychic powers, there aren't such things as experience of emptiness, but these are private experiences, private, you might say, skills or knowledge for that individual to know. And if they start promoting themselves or advertising it, sometimes, that gives rise to suspicion, doesn't it? And most of the monks I've met, who I believe probably do have some psychic ability or have had insight into Maggaphala or Nibbana, they don't go around telling everyone. They keep it very private, because it is private. It's your own experience, your own knowledge. And the more people talk about these things, it tends to devalue them. And sometimes you get the feeling maybe they're claiming something that is not, they haven't actually realized. So just be aware it's possible. Be careful, be cautious.
Thank you, Ajahn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now like to open the floor to those who are online to ask your questions. If you have a question, click on the raise hand button, which you can find under the reactions panel on your laptop or desktop. If you're using a smartphone, you can find the raise hand button under the options more. Okay. All right. I'd like to now please invite Leong Tan. Leong Tan, if you can hear me, can you please unmute yourself? Byung Tan from Singapore. Yes, please go.
Namaskar Long Po. I have a question.
Sorry, can you please unmute yourself again?
Can't hear.
Namaskar Long Po. I have a question regarding vittaka and vichara. How do we use vittaka and vichara skillfully during meditations? Let's say if during the meditation session, if after the doing metta, I would decide to switch to mindfulness of the breath, is it considered a kind of directed thought? Or let's say if in the event, I think yesterday Long Po mentioned about along the way, in case there is any hindrances, or let's say ill will or other hindrances were to arise, and during that time, Long Po tried to use some technique to abandon or remove this hindrance. Is this considered a kind of vittaka, and how is it different from vichara? So let's say if after directing to the breath, if let's say we feel how good is the breath, and to decide if we were to continue. So maybe Long Po could help us to understand this vittaka, vichara a little bit further. And is it a kind of intentional thought that we initiate so that we arise, or it has to be arise automatically? And how does it stop or cease, as in, again, does it stop by itself, or we have to intentionally stop it from coming up again? Thank you, Long Po.
Is the questioner still there? I can go back and answer that question again.
Yes, he's still here.
Okay, thank you for your patience. A few technical difficulties today. We were talking about vittaka, vichara, factors of samadhi, and vittaka is lifting your mind onto the object. Vichara is sustaining your attention on the object. So obviously, if you sustain attention on something, you get to know it better. You're with it. Vittaka involves more activity, doesn't it? It's the intention to be mindful, putting your mind onto an object. If you're sustaining attention there, it's there over and over again, you'll get to know the object. You'll stay with it. And this has a good effect on the mind because the mind is no longer seeking other objects. It's staying with this one object. So it starts to bring a sense of stability, calm, and what we call rapture, which means like you're interested in that object because you're sticking with it. So if it's the breath, as you stay with the breath, rapture starts to arise. You're not bored, you're not distracted, you're happy to be with the breath, you know the breath. And from there, a deep sense of inner happiness starts to arise as well, sukha. And eventually your mind just merges with the breath. It just knows that the breath as an object and nothing else. It's not seeking anything else or knowing anything else, just at one with the breath. And in the progress of developing samadhi, then even as one becomes more skilled in the practice of samadhi, then even vittaka and vichara are seen as like coarser mental qualities. And the skilled meditator maybe just puts their mind straight onto the experience of piti and sukha in conjunction with the breath through a skill in the practice of meditation. They get better at doing that. And this effort of putting attention on the breath, on the object of the breath, that movement to the breath is seen as unnecessary if you already know how to just be with the breath and the piti and the sukha that comes with that. You can just put your mind straight onto that. Sometimes Ajahn Chah would talk about vittaka, vichara in another way, in the sense of contemplation. And this is part of our practice. So you were saying earlier about contemplating or using wise reflection to deal with hindrances. So it's not necessarily vittaka vichara in the same way of putting your mind on one object and keeping it there, but it's using the mind to stay within a theme. So it could be you have some ill will arise and you're contemplating, how can I deal with this? What should I do with this ill will? And you're looking at it maybe from different angles. Maybe one obvious thing you can do is see if you can bring up some goodwill to replace the ill will. Sometimes you may be just observing the qualities that come with ill will. You have an unpleasant feeling, your mind is agitated. Maybe the actual way you're thinking with ill will doesn't make sense once you become mindful of it. So there may be different aspects of your ill will that you see, and therefore the mind starts to let go. So you're looking at it from different angles. You're looking for something that's better, so maybe goodwill. You're seeing the danger of it. Maybe you're concerned, you notice you're angry, you keep thinking angry thoughts, you think, this may give me a headache, or high blood pressure, or this is making me very agitated, it may lead me to say or do something I regret. So you're seeing the danger of it and you want to stay away from the danger. So all of this could be the use of vittaka vichara directed to a problem, the fact that you've got ill will arising, to the point where you find a way to let it go. Or you can sometimes you begin your meditation using vittaka vichara directed to some wholesome object. That's a bit easier than the breath, because the breath, say, is quite subtle. So you begin your meditation and you're recollecting something good that you did, some act of dana, or generosity, or something that you did to help somebody in the past, and you're recollecting that, and you feel happy as you recollect that skillful action that you did. Or maybe you're directing your mind to think of someone else who's suffering, and you're just developing compassion, using your thought, the power of thought, but directed to a particular theme. So you're as if using your vittaka vichara in a skillful way at the beginning of a meditation, just to keep your mind on a wholesome thought, so it's not getting too distracted. Because sometimes, especially when you're physically tired, you sit down to just watch the breath, and it's quite difficult, quite challenging, because the breath can be very subtle, and you put your mind on the breath for one moment and then away it goes thinking about other things, and it just won't settle down and won't stay with the breath. But if you develop a skillful, wholesome theme first for a while, 10, 15 minutes, say, for example, then you turn to put your attention on the breath, then you might find it's possible to do that because you've already settled your mind. So then you're turning your vittaka vichara to lift up the breath itself as the object and just stick with that. So this, lifting your mind up to an object, keeping it there, these are functions of the mind. It's a way you're training your mind, but you can use them in slightly different ways. Or you can even develop vipassana meditation in the beginning. You might say it's not yet very efficient or effective vipassana, but you're just contemplating impermanence. You're saying, oh, look at my thoughts arising, passing away, how impermanent they are. And these feelings going around my body that I can notice and I'm aware of as I meditate, how impermanent they are. They're changing all the time. So you're still thinking, you're using vittaka vichara, but just to understand a particular theme to do with developing insight into impermanence. Later on, when mindfulness improves, you may not have to think in this way at all. You're just observing the changing nature of your physical and mental phenomena in your body and mind without having to think at all. But in the beginning, maybe you're directing thought, vittaka vichara, to evaluate and understand something or contemplate a theme until the mind becomes more steady, more stable, more still. Then it may be just observing and knowing without having to think about it at all.
Thank you, Luang Por.
Can we invite more questions from the floor? Anyone online? Okay. Susie? Yes, go ahead, Susie.
All right. Firstly, thank you, Luang Por, for all your guidance for these 3 days. It's really make my understanding of the Dharma and the journey into studying the Buddhism very much clearer, because I have been doing internet studies and from many teachers. And what I take back today is that Luang Por says that we are a factory of producing, ignorant, conditioned, ignorant mind. And now it's like, I have to switch to a condition of Dharma mind, you know, and then to even shorten my river of desire. And Luang Por has said that we need good teachers. You have been repeatedly saying, if I keep on hearing, is that Luang Por says, I need good teachers, I need good teachers, you know. Yes, there are plenty of good teachers, you know, that I'm 64 now. And it's like, I've gone through my journey as well, but this, after that, it's like, you do not know which teacher to follow. I mean, I've been always following Ajahn Chah's teachings and the lineage of Ajahn Chah's, what do you call that? All the teachers from like Ajahn Chah, Sarana. But now with Luang Por's drilling in me, I'm like asking, can I, is there an opportunity? Is there an avenue that Luang Por, we can have continue to get guidance from Luang Por online or something? You know, is that possible? I mean, this question is not a really important question, but since nobody really raised their hand, so just I take this opportunity, because I have many other questions, like even when I practice, I mean, I have already asked 2 questions. So, okay, I'll stop at it and give others opportunity. Thank you, Luang Por. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, we are fortunate because of the technology, even though travel is not 100% convenient these days, at least technology is there. So I give online teachings every week from this monastery. I guess in the future I may travel a little bit as well, as do the other teachers around. So, you know, the teachers and teachings are available. You don't necessarily need a teacher every day, all the time. What you do is you hear teachings from a teacher that makes sense to you, that helps to arouse faith, understanding. Then you go away and practice. And during the course of your practice, sooner or later, you may have further questions arise.
Yes.
So then you come back to the teacher. Or sometimes you listen to the Dhamma because you're familiar with a certain teacher, the way they express themselves, the themes they talk about. Because you're familiar, when you hear them again, they just remind you of things that maybe you already know, but it's just a reminder. Or occasionally you get a new angle or a new insight that you hadn't noticed before. And the Dhamma is like that. Sometimes the words themselves are nothing special or new. You hear a talk and it's all stuff that you've heard before. But because your mind is in a better state than before, you're more calm, clearer, mindfulness is stronger perhaps, then you're more prepared to receive the Dhamma. So then those words may have a bigger impact on you. And particularly if the Dhamma teacher is somebody of deep insight, say like Ajahn Chah, you can hear a talk or read a talk of Ajahn Chah over and over again over the years, and each time you'll get something new out of it. Even after 10, 20, 30 years, it can still be valuable to you. And that's the quality of the Dhamma. There's always something new to be learnt, or occasionally it's just a reminder of what you know already.
Long Paul, my question is only, when we practice the mindfulness, it's like in the practice, it's just that if there's an opportunity just to consult on the practice.
Sure, yeah. So if you're ever in Melbourne, come here. You can send in questions. We have a Facebook where we do a Q&A session every Tuesday night, and you can send in questions there. That's one place.
Okay.
Can send in a question maybe to Beta first, and we have our Sunday night Zoom session, and that's another place you can text in a question, either ask yourself or just send it by text. So there are, say for me personally, there's a few opportunities, avenues to ask questions and consult. If you want one-to-one interview, or you have to come to the monastery, I guess, or wait till I'm traveling overseas.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Long Paul. I'd like to now invite the next participant, Sam. Sam, can you unmute yourself? Sam, can you please speak?
Just a minute.
Go ahead. Ask your question.
Thank you. Yes, Venerable Sir, Bhanteji, I have a question regarding the elements, meditation on the elements. Am I audible?
Sorry?
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So the question is regarding the meditation on elements. Like, for example, earth element and air element and fire and water. So I eventually, the way I practice is I focus on the skeleton and try to see that the skeleton is quite similar, quite made up of earth-like, wood-like material, something like that. Then I focus on the bone marrow. I try to see that within the bones is the liquid, again water, and that's how I try to, relate the various body functions or the various body parts to the elements. Now, in this, can I just later on, when little mindfulness is established, can I just relate to the spatial form that this body or these elements are just space, and there is breath because of which space is inflating a little bit and then it is deflating with the flow of breath. So is it advisable? And second question regarding this only, it is mentioned in a lot of texts, and a lot of teachers also mention it, that the body contemplation or the meditation on elements is to be done with a sense of metta towards yourself. So I would like to know more on this. How can we, while meditating, how can we generate the attitude of metta towards ourselves while doing body contemplation and while doing meditation on the elements? Thank you, sir.
I think with the elements meditation, the most popular elements are the earth element and the breath or the air element, because they're the most kind of naturally accessible ones. The earth element is the solidity of the body on the parts of the body. And partly we're doing this through a visual development of the visual image of the earth element. So you might take a particular body part, such as hair, or like you say, a bone, and you're contemplating. In the beginning, you may be just thinking about it, vittaka, vichara, and just thinking, evaluating, oh, this bone or this piece of hair, the main part of it, the main element in it is the solid earth element. It has color, it has shape, it has form. Then maybe thinking, well, this earth element, how permanent is it? Well, hair and bones, they're undergoing change the whole time. So when we're born, we are a little baby, we have a small skeleton, and then as we grow up, become an adult, our skeleton grows. And then the cells of the skeleton are changing all the time. Hair is constantly growing all the time with dead cells coming out of the skin. Eventually hair drops off, or when you die, your skeleton starts to go back to the elements, especially if you're buried. If you're cremated, well, very quickly it turns into dust. If you're buried, then gradually it's turning into earth, back into its more natural constituent part, the earth element. So in the beginning, you're just thinking it through, visualizing it, thinking it through, until one aspect of the earth element or the air element sticks in your mind and becomes like an object for that meditation. So it could be literally just one visual image. So even the air or the breath you can develop a visual image. Like someone was saying yesterday, they have wisps of air. Sometimes it's wisps of light, or kind of like cotton wool, this kind of thing. You may have just one. This is down the line as you become more one-pointed and your mind becomes more still. You have one image or one limiter, one object that your mind takes and fixes attention on. That's for the practice of what we call samatha meditation, just one point in the mind, calming the mind. Then you can develop further insight into the impermanent, unsatisfactory and selfless nature of the earth element or the air element. That earth element in a hair or in the bone of part of your body, does how permanent is it? It's not, it's changing all the time. It's degenerating, it's built up, it's breaking apart, it's degenerating, disappearing. How many millions of people have been born and died in the world since the world began, and where are all their bones now? They've all broken up and gone back into the earth. And then they become earth, and then plants, and then people eat the fruits of those plants, and then they become other bones, and then those bones break up and go back. It's a cycle. So you're seeing the impermanent, unsatisfactory and selfless nature of the earth element as it appears in bone or hair. And maybe as your mind becomes really fixed on it and the perception becomes really clear, whoever you're looking at, that's what you're noticing, the earth element in that person. So the sense of a person, a being, a self is dispersing in your mind, and the perception of a person as a collection of elements, or particularly one particular element that you're focusing on, is really clear. So of course, if you're having a strong perception of the earth element, lust, anger, fear starts to fade, doesn't it? Contemplating anicca, dukkha, anatta would undermine the root causes of greed, anger, and delusion. Whichever part of the body it is that you're focusing on, putting your attention on. And the other part of your question about how when we contemplate the body, we also need to have metta. As I was saying earlier, when we do body contemplation, it's hard work, and it often makes people a bit irritable or grumpy. It's not necessarily, in the beginning at any rate, a perception that brings up a feeling of being relaxed and joyful. Often it makes us feel a little bit grumpy because we're having to work hard and let go of some of our preconceived notions and attachments around the body. We prefer to see the body as something pleasant. We like to look at other people, the pleasant aspects, the attractive aspects of their bodies. We don't naturally, for most people, they don't naturally draw to contemplating the body to see it as unattractive, impermanent, not self. They're looking at the body, their body, and other people's bodies as attractive, permanent, a self, something good, something to be indulged in. And hence, all the advertising and entertainment and arts of the world, it tends to be emphasizing different aspects of the beauty of the body, the attractiveness, and we like to delight in the body. So when you're confronting that by contemplating the unattractive or impermanent side of the body, your mind can become a bit disappointed and become a bit depressed, even angry. And I've known meditators, become very angry without realizing it, and they don't see what's happening. And what's happening is they're pulling away from their normal seeking of pleasure in the body and the perceptions of the body, and they're pulling away and seeing the unattractive side, and it's making them very unhappy. So this is one reason why the Buddha taught us to develop goodwill as well, to stop the mind falling into aversion, depression. And you have to monitor this yourself. If you're contemplating the body, well, maybe incorporate some metta bhavana regularly into your practice so that you don't become too irritable, too caught up in aversion, too depressed. Actually, any meditation, when you practice it well, will help to counter ill will. Ill will is one of the 5 hindrances. So whether you're focusing on the breath, on the body, on the unattractiveness of the body, or a body part, contemplating death, any meditation object that is improving your level of mindfulness, bringing your mind to a state of samadhi, calm, still, will naturally be helping you to let go of ill will, and metta will arise. So some of the monks I know seem to have the most powerful metta, have derived that metta from contemplating their body till they've let go of their attachment and identification with the body as a self. Naturally, what's left is metta and compassion, because there's no more ill will. So any well-practiced meditation technique will help you to abandon ill will and develop metta. But as I said in the beginning, if you are new to the practice and your mind is becoming irritable because you're focusing on the body a lot, well, maybe you need to balance it by developing the metta and the goodwill as well.
Sadhu Lampo. Lampo, we have 2 more participants with their hands raised up. Do you have some more time to take some more questions?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, great. Can we now have Ruben? Ruben from Melbourne, please.
Hello, Longpo.
Hello.
Greetings from Ruben and myself. I've got a question about delusion. Greed, anger and greed might be easier for us to see for ourselves, but delusion is hard. So what practice should we do so that we can easily see our delusions? Thank you.
Well, number one, mindfulness and clear comprehension. Because when we're not mindful, our mind is easily confused, shaky, unclear in its thinking. And then we'll mistake one thing for another. So if you're a monk walking through the forest and you see a tree root, you'll think that tree root is a snake. Or you'll see a rope and think the rope is a snake. Or you'll see a snake and you'll think it's a rope. And on it goes. Delusion is like that. We are fuzzy and unclear and not thinking straight. And sometimes we see something that is harmful to us as something that's good and enjoyable and something we want to have more of, because we're not very mindful and not seeing clearly what is what. When you're mindful, you start to see more clearly or know clearly the characteristics of whatever you're involved with. Whether it's a thought or a feeling, a course of action, a way of speaking, an external object or an internal object. Mindfulness and clear comprehension starts to bring clarity And from the clarity, then wisdom and understanding can grow. And ultimately, that's what removes delusion from our mind. So, for example, when I first began practicing Buddhism, I was deluded. I thought that lying in bed in the morning was good. Good for me, good for everyone. I liked it. So I'd lie in bed for as many hours as I could. This is a long time ago. And then I started meditating and I was a little bit more mindful, and I thought, lying in bed wastes a lot of time. And when I lie in bed, my mind is really fuzzy and blank, and I don't develop much knowledge or understanding of anything. I'm just kind of wasting time. So over time, I started to change my habit, and I no longer saw lying in bed in the morning as something good, useful, something that I wanted. It was something not good. That was a cause for more indulgence, a lack of skillful qualities of mind. So I changed. So one delusion less from that. And it goes on, doesn't it? You gradually are opening up to the truth. So obviously seeing greed and anger as suffering when you act or think with thoughts of or intentions of greed and anger, it's leading to suffering. And delusion, when you're not thinking and seeing the Dhamma in a situation, when you're just following wrong views or when you have strong sense of self. One kind of delusion is this sense of self. And someone was earlier they're asking about how to deal with jealousy. So jealousy is delusion, isn't it? I am this person and they're better than me, worse than me. You've created this sense of self-identity, and you hold on to it, and then you start suffering from delusions. So if you establish mindfulness, you can start breaking things down and seeing what are the component parts. So there's the physical part, 4 elements, for example. There's no self in the 4 elements, so that's starting to break down one delusion. Or feelings of pleasure or pain, thoughts. You're starting to see the true nature of these things. As you're more mindful and you contemplate, you see, a thought is just a mental state that arises, passes away. But when we're deluded, we say, my thought. If it's body, my body, thought, my thought, feeling, my feeling. So what happens to human bodies? Human body gets older every day. Sometimes it gets sick, has pain. One day it's got to die. That's just going to happen, whatever. That's the way physical bodies go. The suffering in it comes when we have this sense of self that says, my body, I'm getting older every day. I'm getting sick every day. I'm going to have to die. I don't want this. It's because we say it's my body, or have this sense of I, that we suffer. If you have enough mindfulness and insight to see that's a delusion that we create, we take ownership of the body and say, this is my body, then we suffer. But if we have enough mindfulness and insight to say, this body is actually a collection of elements, it doesn't belong to anyone, then that sense of suffering and the sense of self and then the suffering it causes starts to fade. Well, if you can see a thought or a mood, an emotion as just a thought, rising, passing away, and you don't grasp it as self, then you don't suffer. So contemplating, developing mindfulness, contemplating impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self in your experience takes away delusion. So ultimately, it's wisdom and insight that removes delusion from your way of looking at experience. The one I like is someone who was on a retreat here once, and they said that, I often quote this, they picked up, leaving the hall, they picked up someone else's bag by mistake, because 2 people had similar looking bags. And they had been meditating, they finished the meditation, and they picked up the bag thinking, this is mine. So delusion, mine. They walk out and get out the door and, oh, this is not mine, I picked up someone else's. So it's like a moment of mindfulness, seeing through the delusion and, oh, this is not mine, doesn't belong to me. So they walk back in and put it down. And then they picked up their bag and went out. And they said at the moment when they realized this bag, the original bag they'd picked up was not theirs, they also had an insight. Everything that you take as self is like that, isn't it? You have this delusion. This is my body, my feeling, my thought, my view, my memory. But as you develop more mindfulness and insight, sometimes you get a glimpse of not self, and all of that sense of ownership disappears. Just like when you realize something that you thought was yours is not yours, and then you put it down. If you really see something as not self, you see through the delusion of self and see not self, you have no more attachment, do you? At that moment, you don't feel any attachment, connection with something. So she said, like, when you see a bag is not yours, you have no wish to carry it. You just put it down quite naturally. You don't have to think about it, discuss it. It's not a big deal, is it? You just put it down because it's not self, it doesn't belong to you. It's that kind of insight that sees through or sees beyond delusion.
Thank you, Luang Por. We'll take a final question from Suriyami. My apologies if I pronounce your name wrongly. Suriyami, can you hear me? If you can you please unmute yourself?
Okay, good morning, Ajahn. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to ask regarding the obstacle during outdoor meditation. We have a group of friends that would like to do outdoor meditation where we feel that we can be more focused. Like when we went to a cemetery, the fear will make us focus more. But I have an obstacle, like there's always few of us that bitten by the mosquito, and like this Luang Por. So this bite is really can take like 1 to 2 weeks to recover. In the itch is really unbearable. But it's not all of us that have this bite. It's only I, my sister, and some of my friends. My question is, we actually bring and sit inside a mosquito net, same with other of my friends also. But why they don't bite by the mosquito? I already tried to spread metta. For the end, it works, Luang Por. I try to talk to the end, although it sounds like insane, but it really works. I say, give me time to sit 2 hours. It's really 2 hours later, it start crawling. Then, okay, we know that it's time up, so we stop. But for the like mosquito, then a sandfly especially, it's very hard, and it's really itchy and unbearable. So I like to ask advice, especially I'm very amazed with the forest monk that always go for meditation without any mosquito net and everything. Sadhu, Luang Por.
The simple answer, just don't get born again. End of problem. You're lucky, 2 hours without ants crawling on you and mosquitoes. I've been in places like 2 minutes and that's it. Ants everywhere, mosquitoes everywhere. You just have to get used to it. You just have to endure. You can spread as much metta as you want, but they don't seem to listen. That's what mosquitoes and ants do. We were talking about this the other day. In Thailand, you go to sleep at night and it's in the rainy season, and you wake up after an hour or two and there's 1,000 ants all over you because they've come up because it's raining and their nests floods, and they come up onto your kuti, and they naturally, when they encounter your skin, they bite. So some of the worst kind of experiences I've had, I've woken up in the middle of the night with 1,000 ants on me, biting me. You go, ugh, and you jump up and there's nowhere to go because the whole floor is covered with ants. And you do your best, say, may all beings be well, may all beings be free from suffering. Meanwhile, you're getting 1,000 ants bite you. You just do the best you can. So sometimes I've fled a kuti in the middle of the night. So I leave the 1,000 ants to have their kuti, their dry space. I guess that's the practice of metta. And I go off and I go and sleep in the meditation hall or somewhere not very comfortable, but at least there's no ants there. Mosquitoes, I don't know what to do about them. There's millions of mosquitoes everywhere. Even in Australia, we have them. Luckily, not as much as Thailand, but we still have them. You go to Bodh Gaya, sit under the Bodhi tree where the Buddha was enlightened, full of mosquitoes. I don't know how the Buddha did it. How did he manage to get enlightened? Every 2 seconds, you're getting bitten by a mosquito, and they're big and they hurt. You just get used to it. So when I went there, you know, it's like the first 5 minutes you go, oh no, I'm going to get eaten alive. You put your mosquito repellent on. In Australia, we have a good brand. It's called Rid. That's quite a good brand, and it will last for a little while. Then after a while it wears off, and then they start biting again. You carry on sitting, you put your robe over you, and our robe's really thin, so then they start biting through the robe. Some mosquitoes are so devious, they even walk and crawl around, and they find a hole in your robe, and they walk up under the robe or inside through the hole, and then they bite you. They're so determined, so you just have to be as determined as them. So they're determined to bite you, you're determined not to be moved by it. I once went to stay with Ajahn Buddhadasa at his monastery in southern Thailand, and his monastery had loads of mosquitoes, really damp forest. Wherever you sit, you're just getting covered in mosquitoes. And I had to give a talk like this, but I was only a very junior monk, and I'd never given a Dhamma talk before. So I sat on the seat like this, and there's 100 people or whatever sitting there. And I thought, oh, this is it, isn't it? You're up in front of everyone. There's mosquitoes biting everyone alive. If I start moving around, getting upset, then I'll look really bad. I'm a monk. I can't do that. So I have to sit like a Buddha statue. So I thought, okay, mosquitoes, you're here. You win. I'm just going to get bitten tonight. So I just sat there, and I had to sit for an hour before I gave the talk. And then I gave a talk for about an hour, so 2 hours. So I just sat there. The funny thing was, once I'd given up worrying about it, I stopped getting bitten. I don't know why. I stopped worrying. I didn't move. I didn't think about it. I just ignored them totally, did my samadhi. And there were mosquitoes everywhere, and everyone else was struggling with them. But for some reason, once I stopped thinking about them and worrying about them, they didn't bite me anymore. I had no itching, no problem. Maybe that can be, maybe it can happen like that for you as well. I don't know. Sometimes you just have to determine not to be bothered by them and just carry on with your practice. But if you do have a particular condition, if you have, an allergic reaction to bites, well, try and do your best to protect yourself. Use a net, use cream. You find the middle way. You don't want to risk your health too much. But at the same time, you don't want to worry too much either. So try and find that balance.
Thank you, Lompo. Those are the questions that we have for this session right now, Lompo.